Okay, terrific. Thank you. So, good evening, everybody. I am Cantor Penny Kessler from the United Jewish Center here in Danbury, and it is my honor and privilege and delight to welcome these three extraordinary theologians. Let me just tell you a little bit about some housekeeping business. First of all, everybody who is present in the Zoom space right now is muted, and you will remain muted throughout the presentation. That way we can have a peaceful conversation. The second thing is that to be aware that we are recording this meeting and we are live on Facebook on the United Jewish Center Facebook page. So just to let you know that that is also happening. By way of introduction, let me just add, if you would like to ask a question of one of our three guests, please go into the chat icon, you're probably at the bottom of your screen, and make sure that you send your question specifically to Neil Friedman. Just Neil, and Neil is going to be monitoring his chat so that he can see what questions will be coming up, and we will have time for a question and answer period. So, welcome to the three amigos. This is really wonderful. And as we have said, a rabbi, an imam, and a priest get together. What do they talk about? They talk about our Abraham, a very important man in all three faiths. These three men, Rabbi Eric Polakoff, Imam Gazi Aga, and Monsignor Joseph Donnelly, are very, very good friends, and they take their act on the road. They advocate for interfaith understanding and spiritual awareness. Their unique and shared perspective makes for a wonderful, interesting, and thoughtful conversation. Rabbi Polakoff is the founding rabbi of B'nai Israel in Southbury, serving the congregation since 1987. He is active in Jewish and general communities, particularly as a leader with the Anti-Defamation League, the Connecticut Community Foundation, and the Southbury Clergy Association. Imam Gazi Aga is Imam of the Albanian American community in Waterbury and a chaplain at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. He also serves as a correctional chaplain. He was vice president of the Muslim Community of Albania, a lecturer at Bader University, school director, and interfaith activist in Albania. He is a very active person in interreligious discussions throughout the region. Monsignor Joseph Donnelly has served as pastor of Sacred Heart Church in Southbury since 2003. Father Joe received his theological education at the Gregorian University in Rome and was ordained in 1971. He did further studies in Christian spirituality at Creighton University in Omaha. He has served several parishes and was a member of the priestly formation faculty at St. Thomas Seminary in Bloomfield and the North American College in Rome. He recently concluded a 12-year term as chair of the board of directors of St. Vincent de Paul Mission of Waterbury and now serves as Episcopal Vicar for the Western region of the Archdiocese. And to let you know, this virtual program is being sponsored by the United Jewish Center in Danbury as part of the Adult Education Program Committee and the Robert S. Young Fund. And so, that being said, let's get started. And Rabbi Eric Polakoff will ask you to begin.
Thank you, and we're all delighted to be with you. For me, this is also a very special treat because, after all, we're from Reformed congregations just down the road from one another. And not only am I a neighbor for many years, my admiration of your congregation goes back even much further. When I was in rabbinical school, Rabbi Molino was my teacher as well. And I've known Cantor Kessler for a number of years, and truly it is great being with you. The way that we have organized our presentation is we sort of start with the oldest monotheistic tradition. We then get to the newbies, to the Catholics, and to the Muslims. And so, as we look at Abraham, I'm going to start, and then after I give some introduction, familiar to certainly us here, but I want to go into just a little bit more detail. And I promised Imam Gazi I'll do this very, very quickly, and then we'll be able to continue on with first Father Joe, and then Imam Gazi. And so I'm going to screen share, and hopefully it's now up on your screens as well, a PowerPoint to make a few points. First off, as you know, you're seeing us live on Zoom, but we do exist. We are the three amigos. There we are at the Albanian American Mosque in Waterbury. And it's a priest, a rabbi, and an imam. I happen to like this graphic because we have red for the priest and blue for Jew and green for Islam. Talk about our Abraham. Abraham is all of ours. When you look at Abraham in the book of Genesis, as we read in Torah, as it starts, the first stories, as we know in Torah, two creation stories. There's the story of the creation of the universe, and then a second creation story, Adam and Eve in the garden. That second story has, we see humanity, things aren't necessarily always going so great. And then we have Cain and Abel, and Cain slaughtering his brother Abel. Things aren't necessarily going so great. And then we have Noah and the flood. Things aren't necessarily going so great. And then we have the Tower of Babel, where God confounds because the people in the building of the tower, because of the sort of the dictatorial nature of what Babel had become. Things aren't going so great. And then all of a sudden, we get Abraham and Sarah, and everything within sort of the flow of the book of Genesis and what will be begins to change. And so you can see sort of the story of Abraham and Sarah begins to center the Torah, centers the book of Genesis, and marks a big turning point in how the narrative will proceed. Indeed, I would suggest how our monotheistic traditions then are born and go forth. So after Abraham and Sarah, there's their son Isaac, who marries Rebecca. You'll notice that I put Rebecca in front of Isaac here because she really was the can-do person of that generation. And then Jacob, also known as Israel, with Rachel and Leah and their growing family. And then finally, the last part of the book of Genesis is Joseph and his family in Egypt. So the critical piece, as you can see sort of coming in that middle, is Abraham and Sarah, and thus our Abraham. Abraham, as we know, was originally Abram or Avram. And when the covenant, when Abraham and God enter into the covenant, not only is there circumcision, but Abraham's name has also been changed. So Abraham goes from Avram to Avraham. What's being added, as we know, is the letter He, giving an additional sense of holiness. Abraham is called a Hebrew, an Ivri, meaning one who crosses over. And in so many ways, Abraham crosses over to something distinctly different than what came before him. He crosses the Jordan, he crosses over into monotheism. He founds the three Abrahamic faiths of Judaism and Christianity and Islam, and we all share that, and thus our Abraham. The narrative puts him around perhaps the year 1700 BCE, give or take. Biblical scholarship on this as we go back. Cantor, I'm going to look for you to nod. It's the further back we go, the more difficult it gets to actually place these things. He lives, though, not in any archaeological record. He lives in our hearts, and he lives truly in the text as we encounter it. Details quickly about Abraham from Genesis. He's the son of Terach. He's born in Ur Kasdim. He lives in Haran. He moves from Ur Kasdim to Haran. God called him. God says, Lech lecha, go forth and become a blessing. And he does, and then will establish a covenantal relationship, a brit, with the people and with Abraham's descendants. He went forth from a place that God would show him. He leaves at the age of 75, and he brings with him his family and his wealth. He does not just hitchhike his way, in a VW bug. He goes very much in style. He heads for Canaan, for Canaan, which is where his father Terach was originally headed. And he goes there, and that's the land that is promised to Abraham's offspring. He has a very adventurous life. It's a complex narrative. We get a moral dilemma. No sooner does he get into the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, there's a famine. They have to go down to Egypt. He says of Sarah, she is my sister. Big moral dilemma. They're able to come up unscathed, and then the same circumstance will end up repeating itself in Gerar, where he says of Sarah, she is my sister. There is military daring. Abraham is also a military heroic leader who rescues in what's known as the War of the Four of the Five. He shows himself to be particularly just in that while he rescues the people, he will not take any of the tainted booty. So in other words, it's as if he rescued things. There was drug money there. He didn't take it. He acted completely above board. Hagar, Sarah's servant, acts as a surrogate mother. Ishmael is born when Abraham is 86. Ishmael will later be expelled at Sarah's behest after the birth of Isaac. The covenant of circumcision happens at the age of 99. He bargains with God to spare the innocent people of Sodom. And of course, these words will resonate in Judaism so much throughout the ages. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? Abraham holds everybody accountable to justice, even God. He exhibits incredible hospitality to strangers. And another one of the stories at this time is the story of the destruction of Sodom. Unlike Sodom, where there is not hospitality to strangers, that's one of Abraham's defining features. Messengers predict that Abraham and Sarah will have a son, Yitzchak, Isaac, laughter, born when Abraham is 100. God tests Abraham with the binding of Isaac. We read the binding of Isaac day 1 of Rosh Hashanah. Cantor, I'm not sure if you guys do day 1 or day 2 for that, where a messenger intervenes and stops Abraham from sacrificing Isaac. He purchases the cave of Machpelah in Hebron as a burial place for his wife Sarah. He organizes the search for a suitable bride for his son Isaac. That will lead to Rebecca. He marries Keturah. The Hebrew of that, the English translation of that is smoky. He marries Keturah and has more children, lives a total of 175 years. The Torah says, dying at a good ripe age, old and contented. And he's buried in the cave of Machpelah by both Isaac and Ishmael, by both those two sons. Finally, this story becomes so central to us that, as we think about our prayers, we think about the tefillah. When we begin our major segment of prayers, as we know, we begin the tefillah with the avot imahot prayer, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, the God of Abraham. So that when we begin to pray what is this chief section of our liturgy, we begin by recognizing Abraham as our founder. And as precious as Abraham is to us, the Jewish people, so too is Abraham precious to our Christian and our Muslim siblings.
Great. And that really is a great lead. And the media, in some senses, becomes the message, because as we study our own Christian tradition, we understand that we really depend upon the tradition of the Hebrew scriptures and the Jewish tradition that's passed on to us, and how much of our own faith is based upon there. And as Rabbi pointed out, Abraham plays that pivotal role in the book of Genesis. It's that something shifts there in a significant way. And as a result, Abraham calls for special attention there. I'd like to just focus on 3 texts in the book of Genesis that I would think sum up what we in the Christian tradition find and reverence, particularly in the person of our Abraham as well. And so one of our interfaith connections here is that Rabbi's more of a techie than I am, so he's going to have to do my techie part. But here we go, our Abraham. And I'd like to start with the 12th chapter of Genesis, which really involves the call of Abram or Abraham. And that beautiful text that Rabbi mentioned as well, where God says to Abraham or Abram at that time, "Go forth from the land of your kinsfolk and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." I always love that line for a lot of reasons, but one, God doesn't tell Abraham where he's going. Come and follow me. I'm going to send you on this journey, and we're going to go someplace. I'm not going to tell you where it is. And right away, we get the tip off about Abraham, that he's a man of great trust in God. And that's going to play out all throughout his calling and his history after that. That text goes on where God's great promise to, "I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great so that you will be a blessing." Not just your name, but you will be the blessing. "I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, and all communities of the earth will find a blessing in you." I think right at the center of our shared perspective tonight is the meaning of that term, that for all communities of the earth, we have found blessing in Abraham and in the way he responded to God's call. Now, with that call, in the 17th chapter of Genesis, God offers a promise to Abram. In addition to just telling him to go off to this unknown destination, he says, "I am God the Almighty. Walk in my presence and be blameless. Between you and me, I will establish my covenant, and I will multiply you exceedingly." My covenant with you then is this. My bond of relationship with you is this. You will become the father of a host of nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name shall be Abraham, for I am making you the father of a host of nations. And again, in response to Abraham's faith-filled response to God, God establishes this very particular covenant with Abraham. And particularly when we see that in the entire story of the book of Genesis, we see how important that is as a bridge to the development there. The third text is going to be the 22nd chapter of Abraham, because this is really key, the testing of Abraham, that just every time people hear this text, they're taken back, especially if they're a parent, to be able to sacrifice their own son. And God asks Abraham to do this, and Abraham does it. Take Isaac, your son, your only one. And of course, we know the story where Abraham does that, full of great emotion, and obviously in doing it. But he does it, and obviously God, I don't know, pulls back is the right term, but God doesn't make him go through with it. And his response to Abraham, because of the way that Abraham responded to God, he says, I swear by myself that because you acted as you did and not withholding from me your own beloved son, I will bless you abundantly and make your descendants as countless as the stars of the sky and the sands of the seashore. Just a lofty, lofty promise as a reward for Abraham's great faith and trusting in God. Anybody who's ever stood at a seashore or laid down on the ground at night and looked up at the stars in the sky just gets a real sense of the text of what God is promising to Abraham. And so when we want to draw a conclusion from a Christian perspective in a very particular way, it is the faith of Abraham that plays that central role. And really the sin of the ancestors in the creation story at the very beginning of the book of Genesis is complemented by the faith of Abraham. And in a way, that's where, as Rabbi pointed out, where Abraham plays that pivotal and central role in the story of God's relationship with his people through the book of Genesis. We discover that faith is trusting God. So many times as a pastor, I have conversations about faith with people, and it always, this is not exaggeration, it always comes back to trust. Faith is really, I like to say, looking God eyeball to eyeball and saying, I trust you. I trust you. Abraham shows us then what that means. What does that look like? If we say faith is trusting God, what does that look like? And the extreme example of Abraham in particular really says what it is like. He shows us what it's like. And as a result, in our tradition, there are two names or descriptives that we give of Abraham. The first is Abraham, the friend of God. The relationship described in the book of Genesis is warm and intimate. Abraham, a friend of God, and then secondly, Abraham, our father in the faith. And that's those references are made over and over again in Christian prayer as we reflect upon the special role that Abraham had, especially in the foundations of not only our faith, but as we see tonight, all three of the great Abrahamic religions of our time. And so it's astounding. And again, and even as we do this over and over again, to listen to Rabbi have his presentation from a Jewish perspective, and mine from a Christian perspective, and then Imam from a Muslim perspective, it's a wonderful thing to see the central role that Abraham plays in all three of our traditions.
Thank you, Father Joe. Greetings, everyone. Salam, peace, shalom. Everyone is tired from Zoom, but three amigos will make the best to keep you awake, because it's not easy. It's 7:30 p.m. And thank you very much for your invitation. And especially during these times, I want to start by the appreciation for the organizers for trying to find always new ways how to keep faith alive, how to keep community together. It's not easy. We are one of the years where everyone was same, the rich and the poor, regardless of our faiths, of our races, everyone experienced this year differently. So our prayers, my prayers, are with everyone who had difficulties and who are having difficulties. God is with you, and every one of us, we are here for each other. So our Abraham actually is one of the examples which brings us together. I'll also share the screen. Okay. Actually, I should share the PowerPoint. Okay. So it's we will have a lot of similarities when it comes to information about the family of Abraham, details about the family of Abraham. In Islam, we use a source called Israeliyat, which first we see what Quran says, what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, and then we use the sources before Islam. So we use the sources used by the Jewish and Christian tradition. He is called friend of God. There is a verse where God says, "Salam, peace be upon Abraham," or Abraham. God says in Quran. It's interesting because every day Muslims, when we salutate and we pray God for Muhammad and his family, we also pray God for Abraham and his family. So it's very, very central and very, very, just let's think this, who is the family of Abraham means that every day we pray for kind of for all people, all nations, all believers of the world. We have inspired you on Muhammad, peace be upon him, saying that follow the religion of Ibrahim, who was Hanifa, a monotheistic religion, who worshiped none but Allah, none but God. In Islam, we believe that all prophets are connected to each other. So they spoke for the same God, but with different language according to the time where they lived and according to the people they were surrounded. That's why when we speak about the religion of Abraham, we believe that it is the same with the religion of Moses, the same with the religion of Jesus, the same with the religion, with the faith, let's say, of Muhammad. Of course, the law might change, but the God they spoke about, the God that they explained, that they were sent from, we believe that he was the same. Why Abraham is so important for us? There is a reason for it. There is an explanation. Let's say he was raised in a country, let's say in today's terms, very away from faith. So non-believing in God was kind of institutionalized in today's terms. I don't want to say atheism, but it was an animism towards faith. So it was a faithophobia, religiosophobia, Godophobia. So in this situation, Abraham was raised, and his father was an idol sculptor. He was surrounded by idols, and he usually used to be, he was very smart, and he used to ask, like, why do you believe to things that have no sense, the things that will not help you or harm you? He is one of the examples in the Islamic theology regarding finding God even without sources. There is a chance. So God gave us enough reason, enough mind. If we use our mind and our reason by science, even just by science, if we look around, if we explore, we can find God. And of course, if we have the books, if we look to the prophets, that will be even more easier for us. So there is an example where Abraham went up to the mountain, and he was looking for the God, for the one different from the idols, and he saw a shining star, saying, "Could this be my Lord?" But when it set, he said, "I don't like those that set." So God cannot be someone just. God cannot be a being just for a specific time. He says the same for the stars and the same for the sun. he is kind of the symbol of monotheism. In Islam, we believe that Adam, he was the first man, the first human being, and the first prophet. So he was a believer in God. But when it comes to Abraham, it's kind of a big restoration. It's a new beginning. It's a symbol of resistance. It's a symbol of bringing monotheism against to the attention of humanity. He says that I have turned my face towards God, who created the heavens and the earth, and never shall I associate partners with God. Our Lord is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and everything is between. He has the power to make the stars rise and set. As Father Joe explained, and this is our common story with different actors, which in my opinion, because in Islam, we believe and love equally all the prophets. So we believe that Abraham was a prophet, Isaac was a prophet, and Ishmael was a prophet also. So having Ishmael or Isaac, the one who was tended to be sacrificed, in our theology doesn't become central. So we believe that he was Ishmael, but according to our theology, that doesn't have any specific special meaning. But of course, God explains the virtues of Ishmael because he surrendered himself to. Abraham asked him, what do you think about my dream? So he saw sacrificing his son several times, and then he asked him, what do you think about this? And Ishmael says that you will find me surrendered. So you will find me obedient, and this is one of his qualities. As the Father Joe well explained, this becomes one of the main characteristics. For the ones who are parents, we know that this is the biggest test. This is the biggest test, which he was rewarded about this. So when they had both submitted their wills to God, we called out to him, "O Abraham, you have already fulfilled the vision. So we reward those who do right." So we believe that God is just and will always reward the just. Another interesting fact about Abraham in Islam is that first in every prayer, as I mentioned before, we mention his name and his family's name. We celebrate him and we pray for him and for his family. Another one that in Islam, one of the five pillars, one of the five main pillars is Hajj, the pilgrimage. And Hajj is, we believe that is something, it's kind of rebringing to practice the practice and tradition of Abraham. So we believe that Kaaba, so this is the place where Hagar and Ishmael was left by Abraham. According to Islam, he was ordered. One of the tests also was that he was ordered to leave here, Hagar and Ishmael. So, and then he comes later, according to our tradition, and they built the Kaaba, the house of God. This is where Muslims have to go at least once in their lifetime if they have the financial possibility. So here also Abraham becomes a central figure, and this is Kaaba. It's a simple building, but very, very sacred. The most sacred place for Muslims. Was built by Abraham and Ismail. He was described in the Quran as the leader of the nations. He was described as an ummah. So ummah is kind of a nation, the nation, but he was an ummah by himself because the great example and because the great resistance that he showed. He was very devoted to God. In Islam, we don't have moral dilemma for prophets. So the same is for David, for Muhammad, for Moses, for Jesus. Kind of, we believe that prophets were protected from committing sins. This is kind of, this is the beauty of interfaith dialogue, where we see uh, the colors of our faith. So different approaches towards the same situations. There are 5 main prophets in Islam, and he is one of them. So Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and Noah, or Noah and Abraham. He is considered friend of God in Quran. So, and Allah did take Ibrahim as a Khalil, an intimate friend. He was tested with his life when he was young. There is a story about this in Quran. He was tested with his son and his wealth, and also he is considered the leader of the nation. We are chaplains. We like to talk, but during COVID, we are being very careful. I think we are careful. I don't know how many minutes I talk, but so let me stop this.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I will speak for myself and probably most other people here. You could continue, all 3 of you, to talk as long as you wanted.
Yes, that's what usually moderators say, but we don't know the voice of everyone.
Although, I'm going to accept the invitation for one thing, to make one point just as the questions are coming in. First off, what you'll notice is that you saw my presentation, you saw my PowerPoint, you saw Father Joe's PowerPoint. Clearly, the most sophisticated of the 3 is Imam Gazi. We're not even in the same league.
But we Muslims, we come in a different time, so technology came later. So
absolutely, in all sorts of ways, Islam was exceedingly advanced. The second thing is that for the many Jews, from UJC on the call tonight, when Imam Gazi speaks of the idol sculptor, Abraham's roots, this is very familiar to us as the midrash of Abraham smashing the idols. So we see that, and think about that, transforming an old norm into something sacred. And as Imam Gazi said, to use reason, and why Abraham, in part, our understanding is that Abraham deduced it, to the importance of reason. These are things that we share with Christianity and with Islam.
Please. Father Joe, any thoughts about that?
Well, I think, every time we do a different topic, and our repertoire has been building now for the last couple of years as we've done different presentations for different groups. But over and over again, the insight that dominates the whole thing is how much we have in common, how much all 3 religious traditions, and one weaves into the other and stands upon the, it's again tonight, as we talk about our father Abraham, it shows itself again. And I think sometimes for people who don't have a lot of exposure to people of other religious traditions, they would not believe that. But I think it just shows itself over and over again in our presentations, where all that we share in common is really the more significant point of the whole presentation. And like I think Imam Gazi said, the colors of it that all come together, and it fleshes out the belief and the teaching.
I also believe that we have a lot of common things, but what makes this beautiful is that our differences are very beautiful. So I would say the same in human relationship. It's not the one who is exactly like you who is the wanted one, let's say. It is the different one who resonates our values, but in a different way that makes that very important. For example, I just heard a story with a rabbi today, which I want to share, which I think it's nice. So someone goes to Rabbi and says, I have a feeling of living forever, and I'm not able to stop this. And the Rabbi says, well, get married. And he says, so will I live forever? He says, no, but the desire will disappear. So, so, so I believe that it's nice to meet with different. What do you think, Rabbi? What will happen with the desire to live forever when you get married?
Yeah, so Albania is a mountainous country, and they have going to the mountain, going to the Borscht Belt, whether you're in Albania or whether you're here, it's all it's all the same that way.
So, because sometimes what we do differently, I think, is that we go deep in discussion. We put our differences on the table, and so eloquently, so beautifully, we present to our members, to our friends, to our, let's say, to the people of our faith, that as you see different things in different religions, doesn't make someone a bad one, doesn't make someone, let's say, the one to prejudice. So these are parts from our faith, which we believe are from God, and it's like different brothers understanding differently the same issue.
In some senses, our presentations really become, again, the media, the message, Marshall McLuhan, that are coming together and being able to recognize our differences and being able to recognize what we hold in common, that people can still be good friends and enjoy all sorts of different things, especially in our culture today, where there is so much us and them language. I like to tell the story that our first series, we did 3 talks on different topics. Our Abraham was the one we did at the synagogue, but we had it at, the first one was at our church, and then was at the synagogue, and then was at the mosque. And the first night was at our place, and our custodian asked me how many chairs should he set up, and I said, oh, 75, 80, maybe that'll be good, and we'll have some punch and cookies or whatever. And of course, we get in there, we had over 400 people had shown up, and that speaks so dramatically to me of people wanting to understand, not people wanting to stand behind prejudice, but people want to understand other people, fascinated by other traditions, and aren't necessarily threatened by them. I think that is worth its weight in gold, especially in the culture in which we live and the tone of our society these days. As Imam said about the prejudices and stuff like that, you meet the people and you discover we're all one. We're all one. We're united in our belief. We share a lot of the same traditions. We have differences, and that's okay.
Especially these days.
Yes.
Yep.
Very much so.
So, Neil Friedman, do we have any questions?
That's okay.
Okay, we have a question for
Yes.
the rabbi and the imam.
So, Neil Friedman, do we have any questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
That's okay.
Okay, we have a question for
Yes.
the rabbi and the imam.
So, Neil Friedman,
Hold on.
do we have any questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
That's okay.
Okay.
It sounds
Sorry,
like-
I had a little echo from Facebook. Okay, so it's a question from the rabbi and the imam, and it's from Debbie Pollock. I had a strong Jewish education, but I didn't know or have forgotten that Ishmael joined Isaac to bury their father Abraham. What is the significance of this, if any? Attempt at reconciliation, contest the inheritance, and what, if any, is the significance of this today?
Shall I start, Imam, or do you want to start? Or
As always, you start with hard questions.
I'm going to give him time to, or I'll punt. Here's the thing. So yeah, Ishmael. One of the midrashim is not kind to Ishmael. I mean, we should be honest. The text is very kind to Ishmael, the text really shows him, and you actually see the Menschlichkeit there, in that he does come back to help Isaac in burying Abraham. This is one small sentence, so I think that you really have a very fine Jewish education if you're even thinking about this very esoteric small sentence, but the implications of this are precisely, I think, are great. I don't see this as a contest of inheritance, because the inheritance is the ball game is the covenant. It's not money. And Keturah, who I mentioned earlier, and I joked about Smokey, Keturah was understood to be the woman whose family founded the spice trade in Saudi Arabia, connecting Abraham to that. And it says that they had more children. Abraham gave them gifts. The focus for the Torah is the specific covenant which it sees between Abraham going to Isaac. That said, the idea that Ishmael is a part of this family, and Ishmael, that creates a very specific model as when Jews and Muslims are looking for commonality. And I'm so happy, let me just say, that one of the things which we've seen more and more in the last number of years is our scholars searching and discovering pieces of commonality. So with that, Imam?
Well, as I mentioned during my presentation, according to the Islamic theology, there are some differences in the story. For example, Ishmael was the first son from Hagar, and then miraculously God gives kids to the Sarah. So all main prophets comes from Isaac, from Isaac's family, so from Sarah, but from Ishmael's family, let's say Muhammad is the only one who comes. But there is no difference, according to Islam, in the value, in the appreciation, in the trust, in the evaluation that we do for Isaac or Ismail. So for a Muslim, they're both prophets and they're brothers. As I mentioned, we don't have a lot of details about their relationship together, but speaking theologically about them as prophets, that is a very, very nice and beautiful story. Especially for today, becomes even more symbolic, I would say, even for someone who is a Muslim and he believes what I told. It's not that we keep in mind that when you speak with a Jewish, if you go up and up and up, we come from the same family. So it is a very good. That's why in Islam, one of the symbols of unity is Adam, and we're called children of Adam. So Beni Adam, so which shows that we're all brothers and sisters in humanity. So for today, I think it's very, very important, especially for the racism, prejudice, and all kind of issues that we are having today.
And we also understand ourselves as Bnei Adam. I mean, the Hebrew and the Arabic are the same.
Okay, the next question is from Kander Kessler. How do the three faiths understand Abraham's relationship to Sarah and Ishmael?
Father Joe, you have more experience? Do I? Obviously, and especially as we look at the book of Genesis and the story, there's lots of threads that it connects with. I think we reverence the story of Abraham and of Sarah, and again, don't have a deep understanding of, again, Sarah giving her servant girl to Abraham so that he might be able to have a child. and the like, and all that means. So we really don't have we don't really say that much about it. We recognize the kind of the delicacy that a lot of the interpretation of it down through the ages has led to, and certainly want to stay away from that. I'd be actually anxious to see where Rabbi and Imam come out on that one. There's a hot tomato being passed around here.
Let Imam go first this time.
Yeah. So as I try to explain, because this will give a sense to my response. So take any of the prophet's life and read it according to the Islamic theology, to the Islamic sources. It's hard to find things to, let's say, to criticize, or things which will give you the sense of a bad relationship with humans, etc. So in our theology, prophets are kind of covered, protected from this kind of things. So the same is when it comes to the story of Abraham with Sarah, Sarah with Hagar, and Abraham with Hagar. So it's kind of the same. They are not having kids, and Sarah is the one who arranged their unity. And then God orders Abraham to take Hagar, and this is in Quran. It's not just from stories of scholars. So, and he takes Hagar and Ismail, and he sends them to today's Saudi Arabia, to Mecca, to the Kaaba, where is Kaaba. And I think that there are similarities in a lot of cases, in a lot of stories, but when it comes to some minor explanations, there might be differences. We're talking for a different time. A lot of people try to understand the past with today's resonance, with today's understanding. Even 100 years ago, it's not the same with today. So that's one of the things which we might have to have into consideration when we think about it. But we absolutely have a correct relationship, human relationship between them, and maybe that's because we don't have many information. So that information usually comes from the additional sources from Christianity, and of course, especially from the Jewish tradition.
Thank you. Like he said, no, Cantor, it's a great question, and I think that part of how we need to look at that is to a point which Imam Gazi was underscoring, is that we see Ishmael as part of the family, and there is a sense about well, and there's a number of things about what happens with Hagar, and there are a number of midrashim on this subject. When Abraham remarries Keturah, who is Keturah? There's also there are midrashim on that that try to make some sort of amends in that relationship there. Clearly, part of what the Torah is doing in that section is looking very closely at the relationship between Abraham and Sarah. There's some complexities in that relationship between the two. She suggests using Hagar as the surrogate, but then as soon as it happens, as you know, and as we know, she immediately says to Abraham, "What have you done?" Right? So and then Abraham, ends up with the "she is my sister" stories, right? So and where he's asking her to make certain statements as a way of protecting him. So there's a lot happening within their union, and this is a piece of that as well. So I think that if we read it, we also have to read it through the dynamics, which could be its own other three amigos about couples.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
About couples, we might need a lot of three amigos. About couples during COVID, that's impossible.
Neil, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have a question from Lisi Marcus, and it's an open question. Why is it that we don't seem to learn a lot about each other's religions as children and as adults?
I don't know, again, about what era anybody grows up in, but I know when when I was growing up, the lines were very clearly drawn. I grew up in Waterbury, and Waterbury, like Danbury, is a very ethnic city, and so there was a lot of delineation of ethnic differences and religious differences and political differences. It almost seemed like people were defined by their differences, and as a result, we didn't learn a lot. I know in my religious education growing up, I didn't learn a lot about Judaism or about Islam. And that's one of the benefits we're seeing about this. And I think one of the reasons why so many people are attracted to it, because they also feel that they don't know about. Even just when we did that first series where we, one in the Catholic Church, one in the synagogue, and one in the mosque, I mean, people were just fascinated because they had never been in the worship space of another religious tradition, you know, right in the same area. So it is, I think, for any number of reasons, some of it cultural, some of it's, you know, even the lines between religions were very clearly drawn. Yeah, I think that has prevented, in times past. I think now there's a lot of opportunities like this, a lot of people doing studies and interfaith studies and things like that. I think there's a lot more of that. And in our religious traditions, even with our, we did one of our 3 Amigos sessions for our religious faith formation group, which is an intergenerational group, kids and parents, a couple of years ago. And just did this whole ability again for attracting people to say, well, what is the difference? What do the people of Islam believe? What do Jewish people believe? How is that different than what we Catholics believe? And those kinds of things. People were very, very interested in it.
Yeah, and now, listen, now as part of our confirmation curriculum, we go to the mosque, we go to churches. That comparative religion and understanding is now a part of that, which we're doing, because you're absolutely right. That wasn't the case, and my experience in many ways was a bit like Joe's, in that our communities were more defensive in that era than I think we are now. What we've also seen is that as peoples of faith, particularly given all of the challenges of this type of secularism, which is like a nothing, and we see all of the challenges of belonging to a faith tradition, that has also demonstrated and sort of brought us closer, because we see other people in another faith tradition trying to do some of the very same things that we're trying to do, of create understanding and affirming the sacred and creating community. And we see how close we are in this work, which we're doing, as well as in the social action work, which we do together. So I think for those reasons, there's been sort of a shift over time.
And I also think there is a challenge in learning religion in general. So we're all having that question, how to bring youth to the temple, to the mosque, to the synagogue, to the church, how to keep people more related to faith in general, even to our faith denominations. But usually I would say that those reflections of defense, of not knowing the other, that's why they say that the people are enemy of things that they don't know. So the more we know, the more we learn, the more easier it will be to learn more. So that's why 30 families that we are here tonight, just by sharing this experience, it means a lot, because we know how the other part, how the bad things are shared, how thousands of people are commenting on social media for things which have no value, no nothing. So we know how society is being polarized for things which doesn't have any value. So it's up to us to do the opposite.
Our last session a couple of weeks ago, we did a session that was sponsored by the Office of Catholic Social Ministry in our Archdiocese. And it's a series of webinars that they're doing through the whole year on the topic of racism. And they had the three amigos on to talk about racism from our own three traditions. And at the end of the thing, and I can't remember exactly if I said this or whatever, but we said the thing was, okay, we come to a webinar like this, we listen to what people have to say, we have insights. Now, what are you going to do? Who are you going to send this webinar to? Who are you going to refer this to? Just to pass it on, which just, again, exposes people to, like, people who might not have readily gone on to see this Zoom conference tonight. And you send it to somebody. Oh, and then it calls their attention again to more of the commonalities that these three religious traditions have and the importance of that in the midst of differences. And so, yeah, so I think it's going to take some activity of all of us maybe responding and helping people to come to understand that. And just as I said before, the old Marshall McLuhan quote, you know, the media is the message. They see the three of us taking our little dog and pony show on the road, and they hear us in a certain thing, and people are following our YouTube channel and the like. So
the only problem we have is that we don't fight. That's why we need to work more about media.
We have everything but the fighting, Gazi.
Thanks for the plug, Joe. We have our own YouTube channel. It's hard to find, but it's there.
That's right. It's there. It's there.
And what would it be under? Would it be the Three Amigos? Because frequently when you do a Google search for the Three Amigos, you are not what comes up.
Yeah, we've noticed that too.
There are lots of Three Amigo groups around the country.
So I have a final question for you. We live in a very chaotic world. Many of us had hoped and prayed that December 31st into January 1st of 2020 into 2021 would bring a seismic shift to the universe. That seems not to be the case. 2021 is turning out to be, even in its infancy, as challenging as 2020 was. So if you could offer wisdom for today's chaos based on your understanding of Abraham, what would that wisdom be? And we're going to start with Father Joe.
Ooh. I think once again, the discovery of somebody like Abraham playing such a central role in all three religious traditions, and specifically the role as a person of faith, I think I really believe very strongly that people of religious faith are called to exert a different kind of presence in the culture. I really think that we're called to do something different. All three of us belong to an interfaith fellowship. We've been meeting for several years for lunch once a month, although with COVID it's gotten a little sporadic. But and there are people of all different religious traditions. Maybe there's 15, 20, 25 people at any given time there. And we decided we really needed to move with that it wasn't just enough for us to come together, have nice conversations and talk with one another, have a sandwich and then go back to work, as much as to say, how can we exert a different kind of presence? So when something comes up, for instance, we've taken to writing a letter to the editor of the Waterbury paper. So we come up as a group of religious leadership who were saying this, that, or the other thing. Or we went out and did sponsored a project of cleaning up one of the neighborhoods in Waterbury and helping people who are living there in that neighborhood, helping them to do it as well. So different kinds of things. I think that common religious tradition, the belief in one God, and how that all plays out in each of our different traditions, and the richness that brings to our lives, and what we can bring to this chaotic world in which we live, and particularly within the American culture. The need to stand for something different, mutual respect, work of justice, nonviolence and peacemaking, those kinds of things, to say those are part of all of our traditions. And together we can give, I think, a rather dramatic witness when we act together and speak together and continue to nourish the relationship among us.
Thank you.
First off, ditto to Father Joe. I would just add as well, just speaking specifically to from a Jewish context to a Jewish group, that Abraham is Avraham Avinu, Abraham our parent. Abraham is also called Ha-Ivri, the Hebrew, and again, of traversing from one place to the other place. Abraham our parent. We stand as part of a chain of tradition. So as awful at times as the moment is, as we understand ourselves as going back and carrying forward in a link of tradition of which we are a part, which will continue on. And so that I think that also offers us a profound sense of hope. And finally, a text which I quoted earlier, Abraham speaks out to justice, and that's a very Jewish thing to do. And it's also, as Father Joe and Imam Gazi will tell you, it's also a very Christian and very Muslim thing to do. Mm-hmm. And if we are centered that way, understanding the importance of justice, understanding our connections to the past. I mean, and for us, look, we're all in the Jewish community, we're a week away from Purim. And that mindful of that story as well, of being able to overcome, I think that can give us confidence at this time as well.
Thank you.
Just to add 2 sentences, because I totally agree with Father Joe and Rabbi Eric. God told us, as he told the children of Israel, this is how he explains this in Quran, that killing one innocent man is equal with killing the entire world, which means that every person has the value of a world. So every person that we meet, every person that we have a relationship, every person that is around us, I'm not saying changing people, but at least talking, at least sharing, at least feeling this values of interfaith, of peace, the values of Abraham, I think is like changing the world. Otherwise, we will spend a lot of energy thinking about the world instead of thinking about the world which we meet every day, the world which is our neighbor, the world which is our cousin. So that was actually the message of our last 3 amigos. Make a 3 amigo in your neighborhood. So 3 amigo, 3 amigas, 3 amigos. So with the neighbors that you have, or with people that you meet at your workplace.
On that note, thank you so very, very, very much. Rabbi Eric Polakoff, Father Joe Donnelly, Imam Gazi Aga, thank you so very much for joining us this evening. May your words go straight to heaven, and from heaven straight into the hearts of every human being. I wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
God bless you. Shalom.
Bye now.
Shalom.
Shalom.